as far as our ability to continue fighting that claim. We ended up going out of, it really wasn't in the comp claim process very long. It kind of fizzled and the government walked away from the table 3 times. So we ended up suing them. So we had filed an action in the federal court, I think that was about 6 years ago. And it went through all kinds of the trial, basically, and we went through all kinds of evidence and getting our experts prepared and all that. And we were just about to get a decision, and then they wanted to negotiate and start talking again. So lands management, what I can say is, it affected none of our ability to file a claim, whether that's a spec claim or a comprehensive claim, you go for it. It doesn't affect that, your ability to do that. It doesn't affect your ability to go to court. We did it. We chose then to enter into negotiation discussions, because when you're in court, you can only get money, you can't get land. So we thought, hey, if they're willing to start talking again, now's the time. So we entered back into talks, and that's where we're at now with that claim. So it's been, lands management has not impacted our ability to enter into negotiation talks either. So I just felt that was really important to put that out there from Scugog's experience. Sorry, I'm just trying to look down my list here. I just feel like the nature of incremental self-government, but basically, it's mobilized us inside the reserve community, inside the reserve boundaries. It's mobilized us outside. So we're seen as a valued economic partner and a valued part of the larger Durham Region and Scugog Township community, which, some of them would say, oh, Scugog, you're a community within a community. And we say to them, don't say such ridiculousness, right? And they back down quite quickly because they realize they need us. And so furthermore, so the casino happened in '97, it's been ongoing for 20 years. Through that time, there's been economic spin-off, better relationships, but also we've been able to tend to the needs of our people. We have the lack of education programs because of the economic development we've created through lands management. And our youth are better educated, stronger, and smarter than ever. Our adults are getting educated. We've had a 77-year-old woman just get her doctorate, and she's going to lead the department at the UFT. I mean, 77, good for her. We just gave her an eagle feather at our education ceremony recently. And I mean, we've got a ton of PhDs, engineers, doctors, lawyers. Like, it's just amazing how engaged our people have become in education. That is, I believe, a direct impact of that. Certainly, that ended up giving my First Nation the ability to create its education program that augments whatever drips and drabs Indian Affairs decides to give us, right? I had to get OSAP at the beginning, and then later my community was able to support me, and that's how I became a lawyer, really, is because of my community. So I always attribute that line back to lands management and our ability to provide for our own people, for ourselves, by ourselves. We've also have a lot healthier of a community. Diabetes rates are down. We ended up building a health center for our people, and it's beautiful. We have a doctor there, we have a nurse there, and we're delivering health services in a way we just, quite frankly, weren't able to before. So what my community did in that 20 years throughout the casino was they focused their energies to community development versus economic development. They wanted health, they wanted education, and they wanted to fix up the houses in the community that needed repair and try and create more housing in the community to bring people back home. So that was really the focus of Scugog over the last 20 years. Now in the last 5, the community is saying, okay, we're feeling healthier, we're feeling stronger, let's go out and strike out and do some more economic development. So we just recently opened a Tim Hortons and commercial complex in the community. We had our grand opening on Sunday. So I'm really proud about that because, that means people on Scugog Island, not just the First Nation territory, but they can go to that commercial complex and they can get what they need, whether it's sundry items or our arts and crafts or Tim Hortons coffee or get some gas or whatever the deal. So it's brought us a lot of ability to do act dev, and we're already looking forward onto the next project. So, it's I just look at your community and knowing your council, I just think the Chippewas of Kettle and Stony Point are strong, progressive. You've survived things like Ipperwash. I mean, it's incredible. You guys are a model for the other First Nations around this province. And I just think this is going to only take you further. I feel you have a history that is very unique, and I respect it greatly. I'm amazed at how well you guys have done, in spite of what you've had to endure by other governments. I just feel like you're a progressive community, and your people have survived that, which means you're stronger. And why wouldn't we want to take over any amount we can get from the feds? We trust ourselves more than we trust them. We have to believe in ourselves. And that was really why we struck out and did it at Scugog, because it was a mode of empowerment. Is it perfect? No. Are we going to get underlying title to all lands? No. That's not the way the system works. But we're going to control our lands, because our lands are our culture. That's, to me, the number one point why lands management matters. Our culture is land. Land is our culture. We have to keep that circle strong and keep control over what goes on in our territories. We know best how to take care of that. Some bureaucrat in Ottawa does not. So that's how I feel about it. Sorry to be a bit strong about it, but I just see the empowerment it's brought to our people, and I feel that in my heart. Yeah, so I guess I have more I could say, but I'll hand it back to Rob, because he has got a fabulous presentation, and I think it's only going to serve your people well when it comes to that communication aspect of all this. Get it out to your families and friends, and have them look at this slideshow. It's excellent material. Miguel.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Well said. It gives you an insight, I believe, of a very progressive community, and Chief Kelly here has done a fantastic job, and her people have done a fantastic job with land code and the jurisdiction that they have. And you just heard that the successes that they're doing, and I was proud to be invited to their grand opening of some of their new businesses, so it gave me great pleasure, and I thank you again, Kelly, for that. I just want to also mention that Tom, I think I've known you now for several decades, going back to the Assembly of First Nations. Tom, your chief here, has been very forthright when the time comes to speak at the mic at the Assembly of First Nations. You can always count on your chiefs there to voice his opinions, and they're very strong and powerful. And I recall that from several decades now, Tom. So I acknowledge you for all of that, how you represent our people's relatively land. So I'm going to go into my presentation now. Cassandra has agreed to go to the slides. I've got a hard copy, and I can't quite look back here, so I'm going to trust that it follows the copy that I have. And we're going to go through this. You've already heard Connie. She's given a brief overview of your draft land code, the key provisions. So what I would propose to do now is go back in time and my presentation will touch upon the historic significance of the land management initiative, why we started what we did with the chiefs and communities across Canada, the purpose of the framework agreement, and the resulting community control over lands and resources, to give you some examples of that. And of course, I want to make sure that we address any issues, concerns, questions, anything that you might have. So this is your night, and we're here as your guests, and hopefully anything that we can help answer or clarify, we certainly would wish to do that. So now into the more of the formal part of the presentation, looking at our First Nations people historically. I think that's important. I think our community peoples, First Nation peoples, need always to look back at the history of time. We know that we were the first peoples of these lands. Undoubtedly, your community here were the first peoples of these lands. So historically, you were self-governing. You had your own government. Your ancestors controlled, protected these lands as the first peoples of the lands. And of course, that goes back to time immemorial. Your occupation, I don't think, is in question. And the same for First Nations right across Canada. First Nations came from us being the first peoples of these lands. There's no question. Time evolved, European contact took place. So we have treaties as a result of that. Mostly, of course, starting from the east and then working the treaty process as governments moved and as development started moving. Occupation started in the eastern part of Canada and then moved, of course, west. And treaties now. You have treaties that are referred to as pre-Confederation, before Confederation of Canada, and you have treaties that exist post-Confederation, after Canada became known as Canada. Some communities, like mine in British Columbia, West Bank First Nation, we have no treaties. There's only 2 treaties that are recognized in British Columbia. And whereas most of Canada is covered, for the most part, by treaties. But it ended pretty much at the Rocky Mountains. And government started doing what they did best, simply just run roughshod over the First Nation peoples. And thus treaties did not happen in our communities. There's good and bad to that, depending on how one looks at that. So when Canada became confederated as Canada, they created legislation. One of the important legislation pieces that affected us as Aboriginal peoples of this great land was the Indian Act. It was first established, created in 1876. That's the first main legislation that affected all of us as Aboriginal peoples. Sure, there were other aspects and lots of fine words said about us. They needed us. They needed our help when the Europeans came to look after them, to feed them in the wintertime, help them through the harsh winters, and they took advantage, I believe, of our peoples. They used us when the French and the English fought. And, you know, we were one of those nations collectively that was needed at the time. When they found that they didn't need us as much, they started running roughshod over us. And they started putting legislation in place to put us down, to take us back, to take away our Indianness. And it was clear that Canada, when they created the Indian Act, they did not consult with one chief. They did not consult with one First Nation community. They consulted with no one except themselves. That's not allowed today. It better not be allowed today without consultation, without accommodation. We know we've got Supreme Court of Canada cases that allows for that today. Back then, it didn't exist. Governments did what they wanted to do, and they ran roughshod over our peoples. They had a coordinated approach with their Indian policy to do away with our Indianness. And that was very clear in the history of time. So the Indian Act gave Canada the authority to legislate over matters concerning Indians and lands reserved for Indians. What is, I think, very noteworthy, and this is a quote from the first Prime Minister of Canada, Sir John A. Macdonald. He stood up in the legislature in 1887. He talked about Indianness and what government was doing to our peoples and the aim of where government was going. And this is what he said. He said, when he talked about the legislation, he says, the great aim of our legislation has been to do away with the tribal system and assimilate the Indian people in all respects with the other inhabitants of the Dominion as speedily as they are fit to change. He didn't want us to exist as Indians. He did not want us to be recognized. The whole government of Canada did not want that. They did not. We became a burden. After all of our help to start helping the Europeans when they came to Canada for the first part, we became a burden. Then they wanted to do away with anything that affected that burden. They wanted to assimilate us, take away our rights, take away our customs, take away our languages, take away our lands. The list goes on and on. That's the past. So the legacy of the Indian Act is very clear. We became wards of the government, a pain to their side. The paternalistic nature, they made the decisions without consultation, without concurrence of our ancestors. They did what they wanted to do. We needed permission to leave they created reserve lands. And put us on those reserve lands, forced us to be on those lands, and then we had, in some cases, needed permission to leave the reserve lands, to do business off the reserve. Example, selling of hay, selling of wood. You had to have a permit from the Indian agent of that region to be able to do that. That's our history. The residential schools were created, again, to do away with our Indianness, to treat us as the wards of the government and supposedly to educate us. And I think we all understand and know the past of residential schools and the pain and the suffering that's caused in many, many areas. They put laws in place to enfranchise us, to take our Indianness away. Both Kelly and I are lawyers by profession. Back in the early 1900s, Kelly or myself were fortunate enough to become lawyers at that time. Immediately upon that time, we would have lost our status as Indians, no longer recognized as Indians. That's the past. That was enfranchisement. We lost a lot of our ancestors and our peoples through that process. We were forbade as Aboriginal peoples from forming our own political organizations. Laws were passed to do that. We could not bring a land claim legitimately to the courts. There was a law against that. That didn't change until 1951. Our potlatches and our cultural ceremonies were declared illegal. Our peoples and our ancestors were jailed. Our artifacts were taken away from us. And in many cases, they were put in jail. That's the past. That's what we're here to change and say, no government outside of our own peoples is ever going to do that and have the right to do that again. And that's the importance of what we're here tonight for, and why First Nations across this country are looking at becoming self-governing, to be recognized as the government of their lands and their resources because of the past, and it's clear what's happened. I mean, the right to vote. We did not have the right to vote even for the Prime Minister or any of the MPs until 1960 when the Bill of Rights was passed. That was the first time we could vote federally. The first time we could vote provincially was in the 1940s. We couldn't buy liquor. Today, my wife and I own a distillery, and we own a winery. That would have been outlawed. We couldn't have the possession of that prior to 1960. That's the past, and that's the legacy. So, when we talked about land codes and land management, we met many times about this. We looked at it collectively and we said, we got to change this. So what was the purpose of what we were doing? So this next slide, the purpose of the Framework Agreement was to enable our First Nations communities to take back, to resume the control over our lands and our resources that we once had, for the use and benefit of our peoples without government interference. We had to replace the provisions of the Indian Act and replace it with our own laws. And that's what a land code is instrumentally meant to start the process. Say that the Minister of Indian Affairs, the Indian agents that are from region to region, province to province, no longer has a say over what happens to you as a community over your lands and resources. That say, that decision making, must rest with you as a community. That's the purpose of what we put together. I'll go into exactly what prompted this whole thing in a few moments, but I want to mention a couple of things because they're very important. As you know, you've got the first Constitution of Canada, 1867, and there's been a few times that it's been amended. Where it's affected us most significantly was in 1982 and 1984. Constitutional amendments, Section 25 and Section 35. Thank goodness our peoples of the day fought to have amendments made to the Constitution so that things that were being done were not to abrogate or derogate any of our Aboriginal rights, any of our treaty rights, our rights or freedoms that pertain to us as Aboriginal peoples of Canada. That we would have our rights and freedoms recognized. The Royal Proclamation was passed on October 7, 1763. There are some key provisions in that Royal Proclamation. Any freedoms or rights that now exist by way of land claims agreements or in that nature may be so acquired. We have the right to settle the land claims. We have a right to have our lands protected. These are fundamental things. When we look at Section 35, our treaty and our Aboriginal rights have to be recognized and affirmed. So that's what's in the Constitution. So what did government do after 1982 and 1984 to do that specifically? The answer is nothing. Lots of talk and no action. So time moved on after that time. And this next slide, I want to touch upon that land code, that land management history. Chief Brissett mentioned that I was instrumental in starting this initiative, which I was. It started at West Bank. It started over a lawsuit that our people, myself as a chief, and the council of the day of West Bank First Nation took against the federal government on land management. That was in the 1986 time frame. West Bank First Nation has gone in the past as far as we could under the Indian Act. There are certain sections of the Indian Act, Section 53 and Section 60, that allow First Nation communities to do certain things as delegated bodies of government. And my community, West Bank, was one of them. We first started with an agreement written by the Indian Affairs agent and our people of the day in 1979 that allowed us some recognition as a delegated body. I'll mention and clarify hopefully what the word delegate means in a moment. Then we had Section 53, which is lands that were designated. The old term was surrender. You surrender lands if you needed to do a land development. But you create a leasehold interest. The banks would then take that and say, yes, you can lend money to do your developments. And you had to vote on it. So lands collectively held by the band. And it was for land development purposes. Then Section 60 deals with all the band lands in common. So our community had these authorities delegated to us. Our community is fairly small in population. Our current population now is about 850 or so members today. We're unique because we got close to 10,000 people that at least live on our lands. By far majority, they're non-natives. They're doing business, they live on our lands, on houses and subdivisions that have been built by developers and as part of our growth. But we had this delegated land management authority. I was first elected as chief in 1986, summer of 1986. I came to power with elected council under a real difficult time, if you will, in our history, because there was a lot of infighting that was taking place. There was a lot of concerns over the past council of the day and the people that lived on the reserve. Disputes were happening. Things were escalated to a very significant height. And under that cloud of community discontent, I was elected. No sooner did I get elected that the Government of Canada, through Indian Affairs, chose to revoke are delegated land management authorities under Section 53 and 60 of the Indian Act. And all of a sudden, myself and the council, it looked like something we did that was wrong. That was not the case. It was what they did. They, in their wisdom, decided that with all this cloud of uncertainty over our people that was happening, we better get this thing resolved. So they called for a public inquiry into the affairs of the West Bank, then called Indian Band. And at that time, they chose to take away all of the land management authorities. I'm a new chief, a new elected council, and all of a sudden, I'm stuck with that. So, the first thing I did as a chief was call a band meeting. And we had, I can tell you, the most significant turnout our band in our history has ever had. Every member, 100% of our voting members on reserve were at that meeting. Our band hall was packed, right plumb full, right packed, every person. We went through that whole process, clause by clause, point by point. At the end of it, I asked for direction from our people. What do we do here? We've got this certification. They've taken away this land management authorities. What's the decision? A vote was taken. The vote was sue the buggers. Sue them. Get this land management authorities back. And that was the direction. And we acted on that. We brought a lawsuit, a federal lawsuit, against the Supreme Court, against the federal government, particularly the Department of Indian Affairs. It took us 2 years. 2 years. I worked day and night on that with my counsel and legal advisors. We went through examinations and discoveries, getting ready for court. We were basically just shy of the courthouse steps. I got a call in my office from one of the directors in Ottawa saying, Chief, you'd like to settle this lawsuit we started against you. So, negotiating started. I asked for, I wanted the monies covered for our lawsuit and our time and so forth, and I wanted those powers reinstated back immediately. They agreed to do that. However, they added one more thing. They said, Chief, we would like you to help us look at what we need to do with the Indian Act. Lands, Reserves, and Trusts. LRT review was happening since about the early 1980s, and this was in 1986. They hadn't resolved that, and they had problems with it. So they asked for my help, and they asked me to say, what recommendations could I make to the Government of Canada to help them in their LRT review process? So I said, all right, I'll agree to offer my thoughts on it, but I need a pot of money so I can get this work properly done. They agreed to that. That started off this whole process of land management. What I did, as I went from one part of the country in the west right back to the east and met with all of the First Nations regions. There were 9 First Nations in Canada. Only 9 of us that had this delegated land management authorities. We met in the west, we met in the prairies, we met back in the east. After all of those discussions, deliberations, we found out very clearly that the Indian Affairs Department was treating us all differently. It was all by policy. None of us had the same authorities. None of us had the same funding. In fact, we were cutting back on all the funding. Nothing adequate was being provided. So the first task that our group did was to change that. And we worked hard to put this changes together to say, rationalize it, and put it together in such a manner that they couldn't refute it. We had the facts and the documents and the time, and all our land managers were called to task, and we identified everything that had to be done with protecting lands and handling lands under what was then delegated authorities. So we were successful in that. We convinced them, change the funding pot. You've got to put decent dollars so our land managers, we can do business. That was the first change. Then we started looking at, well, what other changes? You know, the minister today was Minister Tom Sinton. He was with the Conservative government. I sat in his office. He asked me, he said, Chief, I want you to do something here. I want you to go out and get 50 band council resolutions from across Canada to show that there's interest here, sincere interest of the First Nations peoples. You know that? We did that with Chief Manny Jewell when property taxation was put in place. He had sat down with Manny and said, Manny, if you want property taxation, you go out and secure 50 band council resolutions to say that First Nations have enough interest before we start moving as a government to make that happen. Manny was successful in that, and I congratulate him because the results are quite staggering. There's millions, hundreds of millions of dollars now that are collected. Your community is one of them with the property taxation you have in place. Now with myself, we started down that path, but no sooner did we start down that path to take a look at what we needed to do with these 50 resolutions, and then it became clear what they wanted us to do was to do an amendment to the Indian Act. The LRT and review process was to review the Indian Act, make changes, and hopefully try and make it better. But when we thought and we started meeting, no, that's not what we want. Why do we want to do an amendment to the Indian Act? Why? The Constitution, Section 25 and 35, says our Aboriginal rights. We're talking about self-government. We wanted something that was holistic change. And so that became our movement. So time went on, lapsed further. The Liberal government was then formed. Before the Liberal government came to power, they put presentations out to the public, and to the public included the First Nations in the country. They said, you Aboriginal peoples will recognize your inherent rights as Aboriginal peoples. That was their statement in their policies that they put together. They became the government of the day under Christian. When that happened, that became our in, because we looked at it as chiefs and as community members and land managers with our group. We had 14 First Nations. Started with 13, and one more was added that later on in several months. And we decided to say, look, this new government, and Minister Ron Irwin was the minister representing the Indian Affairs. We sat down with him and said, look, your government said that they would recognize the inherent rights of our people. You haven't done nothing to do that. Just like you've done nothing since 1982 with the Constitutional Amendment. We have a plan. Our plan is you're going to do it, and you're going to start with our jurisdiction over our lands and resources of our reserve lands. We sat down, we convinced them, okay, they had no other choice. So they agreed. That led to a frame agreement on First Nations land management. That frame agreement is the main document today that still stands. It was signed on February 12th, 1996 at Chippewas of Georgina Island. Then Chief Bill McHugh was the chief, and everything became historic from that point on because we signed the frame agreement. That frame agreement today holds as one of the strongest government-to-government agreements that our peoples have ever signed in this country. And it started a huge movement because it meant that we were going to be recognized the inherent right of us to manage our own lands without governmental interference. So to ratify that frame agreement, two things had to be done. From the federal government, they had to pass legislation to do away with sections of the Indian Act legitimately. And so the First Nations Land Management Act was developed and finally passed. It took us several years until June of 1999 to get that legislation passed. We went through several ministers. From our perspective as First Nations, to ratify that frame agreement, we had to pass land codes. And they asked us for 2 land codes. We actually delivered to 3 First Nation communities. Chief Kelly LaRocca's community, Scugog, was one of the first of 3 of all of Canada. It included as well the Chippewas of Georgina Island, and it included the Musqueam First Nation in Saskatchewan. Those 3 First Nations led the way with the first land codes passed. Their laws took history and changed the evolution of our peoples. When the millennium struck, the year 2000, that very second, their land codes came into place. They had been recognized in the jurisdictions to manage their lands and resources. I don't believe that your communities never look back since then, neither did the other two. Today, right now, 74 First Nations have now passed land codes. We have 57 First Nations in the developmental phase to work on development land codes. Your community is one of those 57. Coincidentally, we have 57 that are waitlisted to become developmental. Their band council resolutions, their letters of interest, I have them, or copies, or Resource Center has them, Indian Affairs has them. They're waiting their turn, their right to be in the position that you are. They want that right. There's 57 listed. I have a sheet here that identifies all these communities that are waitlisted, operational, developmental, and I believe Connie will have it if she doesn't already. If you wish it, you're welcome to look at all these communities across Canada that are involved with us. There's 17 that are inactive, some of them temporarily. Total, as I mentioned at the beginning, is 205 First Nations as of today. And those numbers keep growing monthly as time goes on. We had a lot of struggles. This next slide here, land code, land management struggles. Lots of inaccuracies, misstatements that people were just taken off the cuff. They're still out there. The Assembly of First Nations, AFN, some of the chiefs, some of the, even the leader at the time, challenged us and had concerns to say, hey, you guys are all trying to just sell out your lands. All you want to do is real estate deals, and you want to do away with your reserve lands. Nothing could be further from the truth, I can assure you. There was intentional miscommunications to downplay what we were doing. Miscommunications, outright lies. You're going to sell off reserve lands. People are going to pay taxation. You're going to lose everything that you've got. You're not going to have any more land claims. You're not going to have no more treaties. You're going to be following the footsteps of government, and that's all you're trying to do. Nonsense. Absolute hogwash. I hear this, I've heard it time and time again throughout this great land. And I know that miscommunication exists in every First Nation. And I know there's concerns and so forth that they can be addressed. You need to know the facts. And I think it's very important. I'm pleased that you're here to listen to the facts. And what I'm telling you is straight up the way it is. We had opposing interest groups. You know, when we were going through Parliament, it took us from 1996 to 1999. We had to fight almost every opposition group that there was out there. One of the significant ones I want to refer to you is this. The municipal governments figured that they better take a run at it. So the ones that were targeted and the ones that came forth in Parliament, committees, parliamentary committees, was British Columbia, the Union of BC Municipalities. They took a run and they put their positions to Parliament, to parliamentarians. They said their point was, don't give these Indians any self-government rights here until they have a local service agreement signed with us as a municipal government. So that was their point. They said, you've got to have water lines, you've got to have sewage lines, you've got to have community services, get this all in place, then maybe we'll consider you having the right that you guys get your self-government. We took issue with that. The buggers, they were trying to tie our hands before we were at the table. If they would have succeeded, it would have meant that every First Nation that wanted to tie into any of these services for roads or policing or for sewage lines or anything else, you had to meet their demands. They would set the demands at ridiculous amounts. Not fair. Not right. How could we be treated like that? So we argued and we fought. We put together our submissions. We won. That was only one group. We had the Aboriginal Women's Society who also came to the plate. They started opposing because of matrimonial property issues. Settle the matrimonial issues here first. Those are legitimate issues, yes. Times have changed. We amended our process to deal with matrimonial laws. We were the first to do that. Prior to the legislation that Conservative government brought into place here before they left office. There were other issues, and they were coming from taxpayers, the Taxpayers Association of Canada. They wanted us to all pay taxes into the federal system, provincial system, you name it. Anybody that didn't like Indians, it seemed, had a voice, and they tried to convince governments. We fought back, and again, we were successful. They caused delays. At the end of the day, we were successful. And I'm proud of all the chiefs and communities that I worked with over those many hard years and those struggles. This next slide is an historic picture, I believe, the signing of the Frame Agreement, February 12, 1996. The foreground there is the then Chief Bill McHugh of Georgina Island. On the far right of that table is Minister Ron Irwin, representing Canada, and then all of the chiefs and First Nations that were lined up to sign that agreement. This next slide, I mentioned the Muscadet and Georgina Island, and of course Kelly's community of Scugog, and that set history into motion. This next slide is a picture that was taken at Scumanus, British Columbia, and it's like this community and other communities, one of the most important features of this whole process, it's First Nation community driven. They didn't come to us and say, here, we've got something for you. We went to them and said, this is what we need, this is what we want, and it's been led by First Nation communities ever since that time. Government doesn't tell us and control us. They provide funding, yes, but they don't community drive this. It's you and people like you that are Aboriginal that make this thing happen. This next slide here talks about one of the important features here is to protect reserve lands. So you don't lose lands. Almost every community I've met across Canada has lost lands through taking away of lands. Whether it's St. Lawrence Seaway areas or whether it's cut-off lands in British Columbia, whether it's non-honoring of treaties and promises, and broken matters, all of this has lost preserve. Roads taken away, hydro lines expropriating lands. We've lost thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of acres across Canada. We said no more. Never will governments, federally or provincially, have that right to take away anything from us. And our land base can never be diminished in size. That is a fundamental principle that's in the framework. A framework agreement, those principles have been taken and put directly into the First Nation Land Management Act legislation. And that's very, very significant. Just to comment on that, this legislation is one of the only pieces of legislation in Canada today that effectively gives First Nation a veto on any amendment that they propose to. They cannot do it without the First Nation signatories agreeing to it. That doesn't happen anyplace else. If you consider the Indian Act right now, and right now you're governed by the Indian Act. You right here are governed by the Indian Act. Parliament of Canada has the right to amend that when they choose. Politically, morally, they may not do that. However, they have taken steps from time to time in the past, and they have done it. With our legislation and with our framework agreement, they cannot. And that's very significant. I want you to please understand that. Now, what's happened? From an economic development point of view, tremendous success story, I can assure you. Our communities, Kelly's, my community at West Bank, the Georgina Island, the Muscadets, and all these communities across Canada have done extremely well. So we said, let's back that up. So we hired the largest, one of the most prestigious accounting firms in Canada, KPMG. We said, we want you to do a study. We want you to have an independent review of what we're doing. Is it working? Is when government provides the monies for us to enter into land code development and to get us into operational dollars, is that helping country? Is it helping us? We needed some answers, so they did a first study in 2009. They sampled then 17 communities, and they found from those 17 communities that $53 million from investment came from just members themselves and member-owned businesses. $100 million investment from third-party businesses was created in those 17 communities. Over 2,000 jobs were given to band members in those 17 communities, and over 10,000 employment opportunities for non-members. All of that pumped hundreds of millions of dollars into the Canadian economy. This next slide, they did another analysis. We wanted to have further studies. Let's see what 2013 provided. So they did analysis. Their analysis reaffirmed the findings of 2009, and they studied the costs and the benefits to Canada. This time they did 32 operational First Nations. Very clearly, when they met with all these independent communities, talked privately with them, their report was all these First Nations that had a taste of self-government, intermeddling with land codes. Once you have a taste of power, once you know what power is, once you have that governmental decision-making resting in the hands of the people of the community, they'll never give it up. That's exactly what took place with these 32 First Nations. Not one community of those 32, and I can assure you I have not heard one community of 74 today that would give up the power to manage their own lands and resources. Why would you? Chief Kelly here has indicated the best protector of the lands is our people themselves, not government outside. Governments change, the peoples that represent government change, and they will never, ever properly look after our lands or resources. We have to do that job ourselves. We have to have the tool to do it. This is the tool. They also found in their study that things were happening much faster, strengthening the First Nations values and visions, protection of legal interests was happening. There was more flexibility, better lease terms being negotiated. Bill McHugh from Georgina Island often talks about what they did on Georgina Island. Indian Affairs used to represent them and handle all their leases, cottage leases. They weren't getting a fair share. When they got land management jurisdiction, they did it themselves. All of a sudden, their leases value shot up, rocketed up. Millions of dollars more annual revenue for them because they did it. They negotiated. The people that represented Indian Affairs did not do their job. That is a fact. More accountability within the First Nations was happening. Better relationships with financial institutions was happening. I mentioned at the outset that I'm the chairman and director of Peace Hills Trust Financial. I deal with loans, not directly, but as an overseer at the directorship level, at the chairmanship level, and I can tell you that First Nations institutions like Peace Hills Trust, like the Royal Bank of Canada, like BMO, like all of the other chartered banks, they look to communities who have control. They want to see those communities go forward because, as you've heard from the study before, more flexibility, faster, more accountability, it just works better. The people at Peace Hills have asked me to provide them with a list, so I provide them with a list like showing you here tonight and say, here are the communities that are involved with it. So they actively seek out these communities, just like all the other banks, to say, let's see if we can do some financing business because we think we can do better business there because they got the jurisdiction. They're not an Indian Act band. And that's a fact. That's what's happening. More consistency with the land use plans, better borrowing for capital investments, all of this is happening. Geez, I hate to be dying so soon. I'm not sure if am I talking too long here, or is this helpful? I'd like to carry on if I may. I don't want to bore you or anything like that, but just getting warmed up. Thank you for your patience and your support in that regard. More stronger consistency of land use plans, increasing the level of interest and participation of members, more awareness of community issues. This is happening because once a land code is in place, once a community has the First Nation jurisdiction, it means that you as a community will decide what laws are passed, and you have a say in every law that's passed. You must be involved in that. You have a right to that. So you're going to be obviously more involved. The power doesn't rest with the chief and council. The power rests with the community at large. Your voice collectively is what determines whether a law is passed or not, or whether there's an amendment to anything. That's up to you. That's accountability. Put your leaders to the accountability test. It gives you the strength and the knowledge to know that you need to be protected. And it's that voice of the community as a whole that's very, very important. And that creates more awareness and more involvement. More internal and external investments. That's something that's fact that's happening across Canada. The study has also confirmed that when Canada provides Community Affairs funding for the initiatives that we're doing, right now, any monies that they provide to us, we're estimating it's very close to 10 times the return on investment. Very close to 10 times the return. 10 million is worth 100 million. 100 million is worth 10 times that again. And the figures keep going. That's a pretty big investment. So when Canada looks at, when they're supporting this initiative, they look at it and they pat themselves on the back and say, yeah, these guys are creating all this money, this wealth is happening, jobs are being created, monies of hundreds of millions of dollars goes into the economy, they look good. That's why they stand. Every minister I've dealt with, from day one, once they understand it, including the present minister, whether it's conservative or liberal or whoever is in power, when they finally get their briefings, they finally get the background understanding, they all say, okay, we'll carry on with land management and we'll carry on with funding. Because of studies like this and the facts that this is return to Canada's investment. They can't lose. They never, tell me where they've ever put in monies and get 10 times the return. Doesn't happen. And that's why they consistently support us. And that is another fact. What main factors contribute to the success of the Frame Agreement? Firstly, I mentioned about community control. It was designed by our own peoples, put together by the leaders, the land managers. All of the background was that from a First Nation. It was negotiated by the chiefs and the people that were part of this. We sat down across the table from Canada and we negotiated the terms of the Frame Agreement and the principles therein that are reflected in the current legislation that exists in Canada. And it continues to this day, and will continue tomorrow and the days after, to be driven by the First Nation, not by outside government or outside public peoples or anybody else to that nature. This next slide here is just gives you an indication of the various ministers here. The Minister Duncan on the top page here, Minister Valcourt on the middle page. Those guys were the Conservative government. Liberal Robert Nault on the bottom right-hand corner, all signing various agreements with First Nations. And they've all recognized, Conservative or Liberal, the self-determination and the support, because they know it's creating a benefit to Canadians as an economy. This next slide gives you an indication of some of the signatory communities. This isn't complete. This list is outdated. I apologize for that. Our team, as soon as they have time, hopefully in not too many weeks, will update this because we have a lot more communities involved. But it gives you a semblance. You look at Canada, you look at First Nations across Canada. First Nations are involved coast to coast. It is a large mission. Grown from that first 14 back in 1996 when the Friend Agreement was signed to 128 signatories, and it's growing continually today. Next slide just gives you some of the First Nations that are involved throughout the country: British Columbia, Prairies, Ontario, Quebec. We're pleased that Quebec, through Wallanack community, we're having our annual general meeting in September. We move from one year, we go from the west, the next year we go to the prairies, next year we go to the east. This year we're in September in the east, and we're over at Wallinac in Quebec. And we're pleased to say that Quebec is now involved. We have First Nations in the Maritimes, Newfoundland, that are going through the developmental phase, and hopefully some of the meetings will be taking place out there. Now, this next slide is meant to provide you with a list of questions, concerns that have been raised, and some of the benefits, the pros of the First Nations Land Management Initiative. And I don't know if I need to go through this. I've covered some of this. This is being circulated to you. To be recognized as, as your government with the real decision-making power, the power to make laws. The power to make laws is really important. I mentioned that I would tell you, or trying to explain to you when I talked about 5360 under the Indian Act, the delegated authorities. A delegate allows, and the way the First Nations that don't have self-government jurisdiction, they operate with bylaws. A bylaw means that you're a subsidiary to some other law that's above you. And that's what the council today here has, and all those that are under the Indian Act have, as a bylaw delegated power. They're still under the thumb of the Department of Indian Affairs and under the government of the day. They cannot pass and have a law in place unless government, Canada, Indian Affairs approves it. That's a delegated authority. Here, with land management, we're talking about the power of government. The power to make your laws, not bylaws, but laws. No ruler above you. No one having the thumb over you to say you can or cannot do this. To give approvals of audits, all of that. No. Governments don't do that. And that's what we're talking about, is that decision-making, to have the jurisdictional right to do that. To be recognized equal with federal and provincial governments and all municipal governments is what we're talking about. And that's what you're talking about, and this is what I ask that you please consider and just understand exactly what it is that land codes and this land management process provides. It's being recognized for that government powers. The accountability is going to be incumbent upon your chiefs and your councils who represent you. Right now, it's easy for chiefs to, in many cases, not be accountable. I can give you an example. My own community at Westbank, I was the chief. We put through property taxation. That was back in the early 90s. I had to make a decision as the chief of my community, and I had to do it without the consent, without going to a vote in our community. I knew that we did it at that time, back in the early 90s, there was no way on heaven and earth it was going to get passed. But there was a benefit that I saw, and the council of the day saw. We said, we got no choice. So we had to make a decision. We did it. We put property taxation. It's been a benefit ever since. We've collected now hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes. Very soon to be $1 billion. We've got over $1.4 billion of tax value right now, property assessments, in any given year, and it keeps growing. So it has been a benefit. The point I'm trying to make, though, is that I did it as a chief under the Indian Act. I did not have to take it to community. Under the land code, taxation isn't an impact. I don't want to confuse you in that regard, but a chief or a council cannot do that. I did it. I had no choice at the time under the Indian Act. Land code cannot do something of that similarity. It has to go to the people. It has to be supported by the people. There's a question, yes? Thank you. I think that's a very good point. You're not the first that's raised it. It's certainly been raised in other communities, but again, if its incorrectness. The point that was just made was that is the land code and jurisdiction, does it allow then for councils to tax the people? Does it give more power to the council to do that? And why is that out there? Basically, I think that's the essence of what you asked. And firstly, a fact has to be very clearly understood that a land code has nothing to do with taxation. It doesn't impact taxation. So you cannot point to the land code or to the land management jurisdiction and say you have powers to tax. No, it's not provided. It's not part of the principles that were negotiated. So that's the very first thing. And again, a council doesn't have that authority of land management to do anything of that nature. And it's something that I think it gets miscommunicated, sometimes perhaps unintentionally, because maybe members don't know, but it's a similar question that's asked from British Columbia to Saskatchewan to any community. It generally is raised, and it has to always be answered. And thank you for raising it, but it is, again, there's incorrectness in the idea that this has anything to do with taxation. It doesn't. Thank you for that. Any other questions? So we've got the floor a bit open here. Anything that maybe needs a little bit of clarification, or if not, I'll carry on. But anytime you wish, yes, please.
So I guess the land comment doesn't have anything to do with taxation.
No.
But that doesn't mean there's no taxation.
That's correct.
That doesn't mean taxation, but it doesn't deal with taxation.
That's correct. That's correct. Under the Indian Act, one of the provisions of the Indian Act allows for property taxation. And what's been created as far as Indian property taxation is that there's been a tax commission that's formed. First Nation peoples are involved in it, but it's under a section of the Indian Act that allows for that. So that's still covered by the Indian Act, and that's subject to First Nation communities that decide among themselves whether or not they do anything towards that way, whether it's property taxation, even entering into agreements, for example, of some First Nations that chose that to raise monies for the communities, they tax fuel, they may tax tobacco, they may tax alcohol, but that's independent for agreements. Those are outside the land code.
Are those some of your taxes in your community?
Yes, we have in our community property taxation, which we did in the early 1990s. We also have a couple of other taxes, tobacco. So it's a GST component that is paid by all Aboriginal peoples, including our own members, that goes into the pot of the West Bank First Nation, and it's collected for community purposes, elders centers, schools, things of that nature. Same thing with fuel, and same thing with tobacco. It's a GST component. PST is still exempt. Provincial sales tax is still exempt in our communities.
Well, you could implement taxation on anything.
That's correct. That's correct. There's another way of looking at it too, because it may not be classified as tax, but it works in a I suppose, a similar way. We have what's called a community improvement fee. So any developer that comes onto WFN lands that puts a housing development or a shopping center or a bank or anything of that nature, the developer must pay a community improvement fee. And I don't have the exact figure exactly. Let's say it's between 2 and 3% of the development cost that goes for community improvement. So that is money that's collected, paid to the band, and the band council then has to put a community fee together. So in our case, West Bank, we pave roads within all of the subdivisions of the band. We put in sidewalks, we put in street lights, we put all these types of services. We may put parks, recreation ball fields, things of that nature. And it's a form of a revenue. It's a bit of an analogy to tax, but it is something different. And those are a little different things. I don't want to go too far in that, but these are the purposes that have been used for that. Questions over here again?
When you were talking about property tax, are you taxing your own members?
No, no. The question was property tax. Should we tax our own members? The answer is no, as long as they remain status. If you have a company or a corporate entity that's no longer classified as Indian, as might be referred to under the Indian Act, for example, where the status exemption exists, tax benefits arise, and if you're out of that Indianness into a corporation, then that should be taxable. We have one situation, though, that was developed years ago. We put one exception, and that's for a band member that has to raise monies to borrow to build a house. First house, primary house, if they have to form a corporation, no property taxation, as long as it's a primary residence and primary house, but not for rent out or for investment purposes. That's the only exception. Yes, another question?
Some people might think that the number of people pay tax, that property tax, I don't want them to assume that that's what our chief council is presenting, is that our own people pay tax on their property.
Yes, no, again, that's very important, and I agree with you. No, land code doesn't touch upon tax, property tax or otherwise. Those are outside agreements, nothing to do with the vote on the land code, and that's, I certainly would encourage the viewers that may be online here or anybody that's not what the land code can do or would do. It's not part of the principles of what's behind this. Yes, Kelly?
Sorry to interject, I just really wanted to speak while we're on the topic. So for Scugog, like as Rob mentioned earlier in his presentation, in the early 90s, the council made a quick decision to go a taxation route. So they were able to do that before any of this came about. So I think it's worth noting that if your council really, really wanted to push that through, could have done that probably already. Clearly they don't want to. In Scugog, when we, this was the same consideration, same worry in Scugog, and when they passed the land code, it was very clear, our members didn't want to be taxed, and our council did not want to tax members. It was a very clear statement by the whole community. Fast forward to now, we recently had to kind of change our casino model. I mentioned the Great Blue Heron Casino. We had to kind of change the framework or model of that casino because of various regulatory changes in gaming. And what we realized was we wanted to be able to tax the operating company and people and developers that came in to develop in our territory. So what Scugog chose to do was to go forward in a totally separate, totally other regime, nothing connected to First Nations lands management, and enter into a process called the Fiscal Management Act. I don't want to confuse matters more, but that's a totally separate federal regime that has nothing to do with this. And that regime is actually what enables bands to go forward and create property and business taxation and create services and levies for things like, so for example, we have a wastewater treatment plant. We want it to service the casino and the rest of the island off reserve. We want to be a service provider. It's an economic development venture for Scugog. We want to be able to set rates and levies for things like wastewater and wastewater services. And it's that fiscal management process that enables Scugog to do that, which again is absolutely nothing to do with lands management, nothing to do with it at all. So we had to go that extra step and consult the community. I'll pass it back to Rob, but I'd like to say just a couple more comments in the end, if I could, about the land code at Scugog and how the members have a lot of power and control through that land code.
Thank you, Kelly. You've tweaked my thoughts as well, and again, I got to be careful I don't tread on something that will confuse the issue, but I think it's maybe relevant, at least in the future. Fiscal relationships. Some of you will hear that term from time to time, and maybe hear it more as the next couple of years progress. So what many of the First Nation peoples are doing, they've asked me to offer my thoughts on it, so I've been involved in some of the presentations, and I expect to be involved in presentations with the ministers upcoming in October. fiscal relationships. So I want to just mention this because I think it has some relevance. What's being talked about by various First Nation leaders across Canada is that our Aboriginal peoples have to have the right to raise monies. And raising of monies may not include just reserve lands, but outside reserve lands, traditional lands, for example, Aboriginal title lands, for example, lands that may have water on it, may have power generation on it, may have forestry, may have minerals, may have both renewable and non-renewable benefits. We haven't been able to take advantage of that. It's our lands. We were the first peoples here in Canada. We may be confined to reserve lands now, but we still have the right to all of our traditional lands, and we've claimed that. So we need a mechanism that we can find that will allow us to be recognized as the owners and parents as being the first peoples. So what we're looking at and what we're proposing is that we convince government to say all the resources out there, whether it's drought, whether it's gold or silver or water or generation of power, energy dams, whatever, forestry, that we get a piece of the action. They need to pay us as Aboriginal peoples part of those costs. And a lot of those are renewable. Forestry grows, trees grow. We should have a benefit of that. So that's part of the fiscal relationship. So that's different from what's happening today. And again, I don't want to confuse the issue, but those are some of the things that we're working on that will be a benefit to you as a community in the future. All these windmills, I've never seen so many windmills in my life covering the areas that you've got out there. That's generating electricity, power. That power, that benefits, that raises hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And the way I look at it, you need a piece of that action. That shouldn't be there without your being paid value for that to happen. That's part of the fiscal relationship. And that's the change that has to happen in Canada today. A question?
I had a question about like their water. I have heard many concerns from like their fishermen and maybe rumors that they make these big fisher companies. I don't really know the proper terms, but apparently they come in too close and some people are very like overfish. I just wondered if many communities work with that, any like successful laws of water and resources like that?
Yes, very good question. I thank you for raising that. Very good question. Firstly, I want to make it clear that a land code, the jurisdiction of land management and the lawmaking powers rest within the confines of reserves. So waters that goes out to the lakes, for example, it doesn't come under your jurisdiction to make laws. However, having said that, you're the upland owner or the adjacent owner to those water beds. That very fact that you are the government, being the adjacent owner, has to mean something. You need to, perhaps, in our case at West Bank, we pump water out of the Okanagan Lake. So we've exercised our Aboriginal right to say, we don't care who is out there, province of British Columbia, the city of Kelowna, or whoever, federal government, you cannot stop us from pumping water out of that lake. It's our resource, and we challenge them. They didn't do a darn thing. And we have water systems that allow us to do that. And we have our laws in place once we pump the water, and how we manage that water, and how we are environmentally sensitive to it, how close we can build to the lake, all those types of things are laws that we put in place. In the Okanagan Nation, where I'm from, the Penticton Indian Band is one of the member bands. They're in the developmental phase, like you are, to pass a land code. What they have done, with the consent of all of the member bands of the Okanagan Nation Alliance, is created a fisheries hatchery. It's the largest fisheries hatchery in Canada. And we put collectively millions of fry of salmon into the lake, and we're reintroducing the salmon. So we've done that for several years. Now we've got millions of fish that are coming back. We've just now put salmon fry into the Okanagan Lake. And we're starting that process. It used to be there before they dammed up the Columbia River, and they stopped all the salmon. So our people, when they first did that, they did it without our knowledge. Our ancestors speak of that, and they said, we almost starved, they said. We had no fish. All of the fish that was going to be dried and caught disappeared. They just, when that dam was put, no salmon. So now we're reintroducing that salmon. So these are things that are happening with the initiatives of the First Nation communities. The waters that flow into the lake that go through the reserves, those are all under our jurisdiction. So we assert, by that right being the upland owner, we assert our rights over the waterways and the waterbeds. And I think that's something that has to be asserted continually. In Westbank's case, in my community, an issue arose over the foreshore. Foreshore, the government of the day created municipal governments. They allowed the municipalities to collect the taxes on marinas and so forth on the foreshore. So we've challenged that. We said, why are you giving it to the city of Westbank, city of Kelowna? That's our land, our waters. We're the upland owner of that. So we worked out an agreement that allows us to have that jurisdictional control over marinas and over the waterbeds and so forth. That is by agreement. So these are the things that we've kind of done in the meantime. Even though the clarity is the jurisdiction of actual laws rests within the reserve boundaries, but we've carried that further and asserted the rights through Aboriginal title and Aboriginal rights to couple with the laws we have on the reserve. I'm glad that you've raised that. I think it's very, very important. One thing is clear too, when we're at the table, any First Nation, whether it's Westbank or Scugog or any community, once you have lawmaking abilities, your council, your elected leaders will sit as the government decision makers. Other governments, municipalities, and the fisheries department, and anyone you can think of that professes to be a government or a jurisdiction can't upset that. You have the power, and so it means that you sit as equals to them, to say the very least. It gives you better strength at the negotiating table when you need access, or you need to stop fishermen from coming too close to your lands, to your foreshores. It gives you more autonomy and more respect. And that respect, I think, is very important. It's like how I look at our Westbank First Nation flag. The Highway 97, the main corridor goes right through the middle of two of our reserves. Our flag is right there, and everybody that sees it says they see government, Indian government, Westbank First Nation government. No one can mess with this. And that's the same feeling and the same attitude that I think every First Nation community has to have. And that's so important, but you need to start somewhere. To get that autonomy and get that authority recognized, you need to start somewhere. And I think the start is very clearly with the land code. It gives you the start, the kickstart, that will allow other things to piggyback and to mushroom and to flow from that. And I think that's very important, and that's what's happening, I see, in Canada. And that's part of the reason when I talked about fiscal relationships, we're using that as a springboard for the next thing, to have more autonomy, to have, the rightful say over all of the lands that affect us. Yes, another question?
How many community members is in your band?
Community members, our membership now is around 850 today, with all of our add-ons, with the legislation and so forth. It's about 850, but again, over 10,000 non-natives on top of that. Yeah. Unique. That's right. That's right. However, all those non-natives pay taxes to us. Over 400 businesses. Right now, it's roughly equates to somewhere between $14–15 million a year revenue to the band. And business licenses, they all have to stick to our jurisdiction. We've got our own building inspectors. No one can build on any of the lands unless it's approved. Fees are paid. Water, they have to buy our water that we supply to them. All of those things have to happen. They pay developmental fees, all of the DCCs, development cost charges, all of that starts multiplying. First thing you know, we're into the tens of 20s and 30s and 40 millions of dollars annually that's collected from those 10,000 non-natives.
So they must have somewhat of a say.
They have a say through an advisory council. It's interesting. The advisory council is just that. They only have advisory capacity. When they first talked about the forming their own non-natives and how they did it, they wanted the right to be elected to council. And they went, it's not going to happen. You know, we become prisoners in our own land if we agree to that. But we did agree to give them a voice at the table, and it's an advisory. So they have more say than a member of the reserve because they have say in the committee and budgets, and they can make recommendations through their advisory council. It doesn't mean that it has to happen or can happen. It means that these things they ask to be tabled, asked to be considered, and that's what's allowed. So they're an advisory capacity, not a decision-making body. And that's what happens in our community. And of course, I think that's important too when you develop your land codes and so forth. You've always, as a community, as members, you always have to maintain control. So it doesn't matter how much development takes place on your lands, you always have to have that control. Allow the advice, work with the people, make sure they're happy, but don't give them decision-making and law-making for sure. Yes, another question.
So what are good hunting laws change?
I'm sorry?
What hunting laws change in the land code?
Are you hunting laws? Oh.
What are they change under that land code?
Well, you have jurisdiction over wildlife on the reserve, with the exception of migratory birds. Migratory birds, just for clarification, that's an international treaty, United States and Canada, and migratory birds are covered by the international treaty. But anything that deer or bear or wildlife, that's management, wildlife management, that certainly is something that you would consider as affecting some sort of land management controls. Fisheries is a bit problematic. You've got the Federal Fisheries Department. So basically, three things that aren't covered within the jurisdiction of land management. One, migratory birds. Two, fisheries. And three, having the right to put atomic bombs and that atomic energy, that type of thing. That's not allowed simply by international laws. But when you consider resource management and all of the other things, including wildlife, all covered. How you deal with your lands, all covered. What happens, how you build things, who builds on it, how deep you put the water lines, how, what sewage line requirements you have, all under your control. Anything that has impact on lands and resources other than those three things I mentioned are under your control. Good question, thank you. Yes, another one.
Just for some clarification, what was that you said about the fisheries?
Fisheries is the Federal Fisheries Department, and when we entered into the French agreement, we had to accept the fact, and it's still a bit of a sore point of contention, is that the Fisheries Department still has jurisdiction over fisheries. Now, having said that, rivers, and I'll use British Columbia as an example. I'm more familiar with the Fraser River, for example, one of the biggest rivers, the main rivers that flows through British Columbia. First Nation peoples along the shores of the Fraser River still have fishery rights, and they've upheld it through Aboriginal title and Aboriginal rights. So they may not have laws that they can pass. They have agreements in place and understanding that they have food fisheries and commercial fishery rights. So it's being exercised. One of my good friends, a member of our lands board, Chief Gordon Planis from the Souk First Nation, Vancouver Island, what they have right now on the ocean, or in the ocean, is they have clam beds. They have geoduck. They have oyster beds. They're in the millions and millions of oysters. I think he told me 10 million oysters that they're rearing right now and taking advantage of the bay in front of the reserve. They're doing that, and they're doing that without being taxed. They're doing it because they say they can do it. And they're selling their product to China and other people around the world. So it's being exercised, and it's understood by both provincial and federal governments that, yes, you may have the jurisdiction, federal government, over fisheries, but nonetheless, this is what this community has done. So those things are, in fact, happening. Yes?
We had people around here exercising their rights in the tobacco trade.
Yes?
The federal government has started putting their foot down on it and started taxing them.
Interesting, the way my legal background, that I have to say, kind of kicks in. If you manufacture it, grow it, basically there's nothing they can do to stop it. What they could do, and it becomes problematic, is once it's shipped off the reserve for resale, that's where the problems happen, and that's where their jurisdiction will kick in. But as far as manufacturing it on reserve, growing it on reserve, they can't stop you there. That's my clear understanding. You've got your own seed, you grow it, but as soon as you start moving it and shipping it from one province to another, bang, the tobacco is seized.
That's just how the government operates.
That's how the government operates, yes.
They don't get a part of the action, eventually they find some avenue or whatever.
Unfortunately, yes. Yes. But again, when we talk about the fiscal relationships, you know, these are things that need to change over time. So we need a piece of the action. So if there's an opportunity, we've got to find a way that something comes back to communities such as yours, whether it's tobacco or whatever. These are things that need to be clearly looked at.
With these fiscal relations, it's supposed to be since the beginning of contact with it's supposed to be part of this natural resources sharing. And it's in the treaties.
Yes, the fiscal relationship, I think, is meant to go a little further now. It's the capacity to raise revenues by the First Nations, is what we're saying. So in the treaties, there was recognition of things like hunting and fishing rights, and there were certain payments that have happened in various treaties. I've studied various treaties from one end of the country to another. There's payments and ammunition and all those types of clauses built in. But as far as revenue-making capacity, that's what's limited. And unfortunately, with the Supreme Court of Canada case, with the William case at Honeymoon in British Columbia that created a recognized Aboriginal title, one of the things that's still missing in law and common law is the fact that there is no clarity on self-government, what that means on Aboriginal title lands. There's some vacuums in there that still have to be resolved. Anyways, I know we're touching on many different subjects, and it goes beyond the land code and land management, but there is an essence, and there is a connection. And I think at this point, I just want to make this final point on this topic before I move on here, is that once you have governmental decision-making, you start using and then expanding that, like the Chief Francis of the world, and the First Nations with his aquaculture and things like that, and it's being done. And hopefully with fiscal relationships and that sort of thing, we're going to reach agreements with Canada and with the various provinces where we have more say as to resources, renewable and non-renewable, and get a decent piece of the action that we believe we're entitled to. So I'll try and go just to finish up briefly. I'm just going to summarize very quickly. I've discussed some of the benefits, and sometimes communities will say, well, we've talked all about benefits. There must be some negative issues here. So we tried to put together what are the negative issues. Is there any cons that go along with this? And we put our heads together, we put this one page together. When very simply, the negative, or sometimes seen as the negative of land management, a First Nation, yes, will have to take full responsibility for your future decision making. So if you make the wrong decisions, you could be liable. You can't blame anybody else for your future mistakes if you have the total decision making. Training, always a problem. We've asked for more training.
Is there enough training dollars to train land managers? We're working on that. It's problematic, so you have to divert funds from the land management process into the training. We're now looking at amending the next round of just 5-year negotiations starting April 1 of 2018. So hopefully we're going to have more money in training. No turning back. Once you move into this, I've told you about all those communities that examined, none would. They made it clear. The actual fact you cannot turn back to Indianac once you have this. Is the community ready? Is there community readiness? Are you ready as a community to take charge of the decision making? That's a big question. Some communities simply aren't. And we have had some unsuccessful votes, no question. Far minority, but they have been unsuccessful. Some, like your community, you're going a second round. And that will be up to you. That's not up to me or Kelly or anybody else that's with the Lands Board. That's totally your decision. We'll try and help answer questions, present the facts, but it's dependent upon you. Do you have the community readiness? Do you feel you have the proper counsel or staff experience to be the full decision makers? Sometimes those issues are raised, and that's a community decision. That's not anybody else's. That's your own community. But as Kelly and I both have said, pre-think you're far better off having the control of decision making with you rather than with some minister that sits in the desk in Ottawa or someplace else. But again, those are decision makers that you have. There's a question, yes?
Oh, I'm just curious though, because you talk about there's no going back. You should go and I guess I'm just wondering because it sounds like from the direction that you're speaking from, both of you who were up there today, have a lot of sound and really strong and economic communities, whether that's single and I'm not sure where the full potential economic growth comes from. But it sounds like it's here. So if a community goes into that and they're not prepared to have that underpinning or that foundation of economic development in place, what happens? And perhaps like the 10,000 we call cottages, or the 10,000 people coming in and paying taxes, but that type of number is not here, so you wouldn't be able to rely on that taxation to be able to build up the community for that economy. So I guess I'm just wondering, like what came first for you guys? Did you already have a prosperous direction for your economy, or and what would any concerns be with the, because I'm just speaking of with there's no going back, what ramifications does that bring about?
Well, let's go back to the communities that have passed land codes. Many are urban-oriented, like my community. I think Kelly's is urban-oriented. We have other communities that are in the bush, far in the bush, classified as rural. Some of the communities a couple hours north of any town or municipal areas, like the McLeod Lake, for example, north of Prince George. They chose it because they have forestry lands and have a great, vast resource, very valuable. They wanted to take charge of that forestry and handle it themselves. Put their laws in place that said how they cut it, how they grow it, how they manage it, all of those types of things. A resource for them, waters that they have in their lands, that sort of thing. Other communities for various regions have said that, we don't have all the development, we don't have all of this, and maybe there's no hope of anything in the immediate future, maybe in 20 or 50 years, maybe there will be. They chose it because they simply want to say that we want that right to make decisions ourselves. Because once we have it, no government, doesn't matter how many times the federal government changes its leadership, they're not going to impact us. And they want that knowledge and security in place. So some of the communities have done it from that perspective. Every community has different motivators My community is heavy in economic development, shopping centers and things of that nature, residential housing and building things and that sort of thing. But that's just us. Other communities in the fisheries area that have gone into alternative energy projects, some of them very, very intensified. They put their laws in place that governs those types of things. There's all kinds of motivating reasons for communities to do it. So it all depends on the community. When it comes right down to it, it doesn't matter where the community is situated in Canada. If there's a will and a feeling that we want to have decision making here, like in this case, your community, that's all that really takes. The rest will come depending on the will of what you intend to do. You may have a lot of development plans. I don't know what your development plans are. I can tell you, though, that should you implement and start moving ahead with some of the development plans, you can sure move a heck of a lot faster. You're not going to have the red tape of Indian Affairs holding you back. You want to vote on something in the community, it depends on how you put it together, but you can do that in a matter of weeks as opposed to years or maybe never. I've seen Chief Austin Baird, if you were here, he would talk to you. I've heard him many times at Muscadet say that they had opportunities with farm implementation, farm implements, equipment. Big companies coming and saying they want all this big farm machinery, combine, and everything else. They were going to come on Muscadet lands. They started the negotiations. Indian Affairs got involved. Lo and behold, 2-3 years later, nothing happened. The farm implement group walks away and says, forget it. You can't get your act together. We're not interested here. They moved on, and they're now in Prince Albert. That's an example. Simply for the fact that when you're ready, you can move at the speed of business, is what it means. So that's what we're talking about here. So every community is different. So all kinds of motivating factors. But I think the speed of business without the red tape, I can tell you that in lands, when we operated under the Indian Act, every lease had to have an audit. And the audit was a term that just is used to say, we're going to check everything here, and they make you do this or that. Some of it, in my feelings or estimations, was nonsensical. I can give you an example. And in our community, we got pretty much every bank and every major bank in Canada located on our lands as part of our land base, and they're tenants of ours. I can tell you, when we put our first bank, the Royal Bank of British Columbia, on the reserve, we actually were putting the vault in, and we were all construction, we were putting the vault into the bank when finally the lease got approved. We spent over $200,000, close to $200,000 on legal fees because Justice Department tried to hang us up to say we had to meet certain clauses. At the end of the day, after all of this time went by, close to a year, they came back and agreed with us. But it cost us time, delays. We built it when ahead anyways. But they almost stopped us. You know, I guess had it not been for the tenacity of the group, I guess it may not have happened. It would have stopped us. But we did it. But those are the things you can prevent. Speed of business, making your own decision when the time is right. If you don't have that capacity, you're going to be stuck with having to go with your cap in hand and try and convince the government or financiers to say, hey, we want to do this. How can you support it? And you've got a tremendous amount of lobby, I can tell you. I'm familiar with that. I deal with that world of business, and I know exactly what happens. It's things like that may be a need for you to consider for land management. And I think those are very valid reasons. Being ready when you feel that you're ready, and not having somebody stop you or hold you back. So those are the types of issues, relationships with Indian Affairs and so forth. The bottom line, you're going to have less contact with Indian Affairs officials. Over time, very quickly, they're not going to be coming here saying you can or cannot because they have no authority. All of the capital programs still continue. You're not going to be impacted. In fact, my experience has been in my own community, our staff, our managers are all told, you go out there and get every grant you can. Get every housing subdivision. Get every piece of infrastructure every water line you can get, every sewage line, every school. Nothing stops in that regard. So we don't have to fill out all these reports and audits, and the staff are tied up trying to go through everything and say, convince them, well, we spent the money in the right way and all that. Forget it. Your decision, that's your right, and your time is spent on the projects that have to be spent on, and you create a lot more opportunities that way. I can tell you from first-hand experience, that's what we've done, and I think that's what most of the communities that are involved in are now doing. They're moving ahead much quicker than communities that don't have that authority, believe me. A question, the process. Well, I think you already know the question about if your vote is unsuccessful, you're now on your second vote, and whatever happens, happens, and that will be your community's decision, no one else's. I can tell you we had one community in British Columbia. They were so determined, they went 3 votes, and they finally had their land code passed. Last vote, overwhelmingly in support. Took them 3 tries, took them many years. A lot of tenacity in that community. And we have communities that have been unsuccessful. Not every, I told you before, not every community has voted successfully. We have some of those communities that were unsuccessful, not just yours, but others saying, we want back here, we want another go at it. So we're lobbying on their behalf so that they get another chance. It's only fair to them. Another question, why develop a land code if your membership doesn't want to develop lands? I think I've covered that for the basic reasons that when you're ready, you have the availability to move when you feel the time is right. And all these questions and issues here, please, this document is for you and read them, and any questions you have and anything here, please ask Cassandra or myself, Kelly, any of our group. Question, is there a benefit of going through this land management process on your way to self-government? Answer is yes. We have 3 communities, my community at West Bay, the Tawasin community, and the Sliammon First Nation that have moved on. In 2 of the communities, Sliammon and Tawasin, and British Columbia, they moved on to a modern-day treaty process that includes self-government. So they now use the land code as a stepping stone. We did the same thing. We went not to a modern-day treaty, we went to a self-government agreement with Canada. Our land code just picked up, moved over, and dropped right in the middle of our self-government agreement, and that's the strength of our whole self-government agreement is the land code. Once you have that, you have the strongest part of any self-government. It's control over your lands and your resources, the most fundamental things. Another question or concern, will land code affect your treaty? Will it cede your territorial rights and title if you vote yes on that? Clearly, no. Kelly here, I think, is a prime example. You have a treaty, it hasn't impacted you negatively or otherwise, and you hear it right directly from her, and most of our communities are actually treaty, they're involved. So the answer is no, it's not going to impact or affect your treaty. Question, what is the legal interest in First Nation land for a member, and how does that compare to traditional holdings? I guess that raises the whole issue of CPs and CP holders. I understand you have CP holders, certificate of possession holders here. My community is that way. We have 2 reserves. About 90% of our reserve lands is CP held on 2 of our reserves. Other lands are not. They're all lands held in common. When we went through our land code vote, we had to satisfy all the CP holders that no, we're not going to take your land away. I'm in fact a CP holder of my own lands. And I'm certainly not going to say that the council in the future is going to take away my land as a CP holder. And we had to go through the process. We met with all the family heads, CP holders, and said, this is how it's going to work. We have a land use plan. We all agree as to what the land use plan, this is what can be done, this is how the community is going to deal with it. That's the governing of what's future development, but lands can't be unilaterally taken by a CP member or against a CP member or otherwise. Rights that exist for the land code must exist. Leases must be honored. Agreements must be kept in place. So those are clearly some of the principles that are contained. So any CP holder that might be worried, please don't wait, because I can tell you as a CP holder in my own community, we've gone through that, and many other communities are in the same boat. Some cases, we have in the prairies, for example, people that have families, they said we have traditional holdings of land. We have no CP interest, nothing on paper, but we've been allowed to use it, and we want to be able to keep using it. If you look at the Indian Act, there's no section of the Indian Act that allows recognition of traditional holdings. Nothing. Under a land code, communities like on the prairies, for example, that I use, can pass their own laws to determine what the interest might be and spell them out. A right to use it, a right to farm it, maybe they pay a percentage or a piece or something into the band members. That's a community decision. But then it becomes a valid instrument, and they could validly put a law or an interest in place that will allow the banks to lend money for tractors and farm implements or cars or vehicles, that sort of thing. They couldn't do that before under the Indian Act. So those are some of the things that are done. So just in a quick summary, I know we've been going quite a long time here. It's 1 in every 3 First Nations, not 4, now that want to implement self-determination, and that's happening right now. Hundreds of millions of dollars we know is going into the economy, 10 times the financial return, and we haven't had to give up the reserve lands. We don't have to turn our lands into provincial lands or fee simple. We do it under our own laws, under reserve lands, and we have the best of both worlds. When we first negotiated and put this framework principles together, one of the first things that government came to us and said to us as the chiefs of the day, they said, you want to have it under your own name? You want it under West Bank lands? You want it under Scugog lands? And we don't have to have it under the Indian Act? We brought our lawyers, we sat around the table, and we discussed it from one end to another, and we said, and our final decision was no. We have the best of both worlds this way. This way, we have the full jurisdiction, we have the full rights, we have the full lawmaking capacity. That's clear, that can never be taken away from us. Secondly, and very importantly, we wanted to have the funding obligation and the fiduciary responsibility remain as a hook on government to say, you have to fund us. We do land management, you guys, you gotta pay us to hire our land managers. So having it the way we have it allowed us to do that. And that's what we thought, and that's our legal team and ourselves that decided that was the best. And that's still the case today. We think and believe very strongly that is still the best outcome. In the future, we can always come back if we decide at some point in time, once we have fiscal relationships and all those types of things, and land claims all settled, and treaties honored and all that. Once we get all that done, maybe we'll come back and say, all right, your community example, Chippewas of Stoney and Kettle Point, it's in your name now, not Her Majesty the Queen. That's a future time. For the time being, keep the hook on government, make them pay, and don't lose any of those things. And so far, it's working. Bottom line, I guess every First Nation that wants the opportunity to do what you're doing should have that right. Our job, my job as chair of the Lands Advisory Board is to help First Nation communities such as yours and others who want to get into this initiative, and everyone we believe has to have that right given to them. So that's what we're lobbying for, and so far it's slowly coming together. So it's been an honor to be up here and say these few words to you, and thank you very much. The night's not over. I think, Kelly, you were going to offer a few other thoughts. Yes.
I'll be quick about it, guys. I know you probably want to get home to your families. I just wanted to address some of the questions that came around. You know, I think the question was asked earlier, what were your communities like before you entered lands management? So just using my own example from Scugog First Nation, we are a landlocked community We have no waterfront in our First Nation. We were traditionally used Scugog as a hunting and fishing and trapping and gathering place in the summers. We came from around Indian Point near Balsam Lake, and we would go to Scugog every summer. And basically, the government found that some of our Mississauga people there and drew an artificial line around us and said, okay, you're Reserve 34, and kept us there. It came to the point where Scugog was flooded, and we ended up having to be displaced by the government and put in a place called Coldwater, which is kind of near the Chippewas of Ramah. And they weren't too happy about Scugog people coming there because resources were scarce, and they're thinking, who are these people? So we stayed there for a couple of years, and then the chief, Joseph Crane, at the time, moved us back. He said, you know what, let's go back to Scugog, forget this. We'll clean up the lands on our own and care for them. Because the Trent Severn waterway had been flooded, and it created a noxious situation in Scugog, and that's why the government felt they would go in and pluck us out and move us to Coldwater. So we ended up going back, and only to find that all the waterfront we traditionally had enjoyed had been parceled off and sold. So we found one piece of 800 acres of farmland in the middle of the northern part of Scugog Island First Nation, and our chief purchased it back with our treaty annuity money. So that's what we had, was basically cornfields. We had nothing else. When I moved there in '92 with my mom and dad, they moved us back home. There was really, again, nothing there. We had, I think, a membership list. At that point, it had grown slightly to 24 people. 24 people, small lady. And really through this lands management process, it's brought us, well, and of course through successive changes to the status and membership laws too, that has impacted our membership numbers, such that we're 228 strong. But we've had growth in the community, membership, baby booms, etc. So, you know, it's, lands management has really given us, breathed life into Scugog, and now we've been able to purchase back fee simple lands that have part of our treaty territory running through them. Now, those lands had never been recognized, our treaty had never been recognized under those lands until our most recent round of negotiations with the government under the Williams Treaties. But Treaty 27 does run through Lake Scugog, and we were able to purchase fee simple land so that we have property on the water. So that's revived our culture, and basically given us some hope for the revitalization of culture. And you know, so even if you do have economic development and gaming, as in the case of Scugog, it's actually breathed a fresh life into our community, and our cultural reclamation projects are strong. You know, there's a question about hunting on reserve, again, and that question about water. So we, until very recently, had no recognition of trade rights to the water, but even before that recognition was given, the government, nothing formal was in place, but being under lands management and having created relationships with the local township and other governments, we ended up being able to be a major contributor to the program for lake health in Scugog Island, Lake Scugog, where I think it was like 10 years ago, literally one day all the fish in Scugog turned up dead. No kidding. They still to this day don't have the full answer for that as to why that happened, which is totally disturbing. But they realized that we were very upset, to say the least, and they've been listening to us as real partners in restoring the lake health. Now it's healthy, the fish are healthy, the lake is thriving, and they come to us asking us what we want to do with it. And again, this is before formal recognition of our treaty rights. This is just because they know that we're major players in the community, and they need our help, and they need our knowledge, and they need our guidance. So they're asking us, please can you sit on this lake steward board? Please can you be part of what we're doing to try and revitalize the lake health, etc. So that's been a real benefit to Scugog, and again, we feel like we're invested or reinvested in the lake health and we practice our cultural traditions in those waters. So, you know, lawmaking authority, it's huge. As a lawyer, of course, perhaps I'm a little close to the topic, but I have to say we've been able to address issues for ourselves, by ourselves, with respect to things like community nuisance and trespass. We have a dog law. We had a problem with dogs. Now everyone has them all safely kenneled and they're not running around the res wild and biting people. That's a good thing. We passed an MRP law. We have a development law and a business license law. We're about to pass a land use plan, again, which has been hugely driven by our membership. So that's really been key. I think the members now at SUGOG have more authority and control over transparent governance than they have ever had. So I just wanted to add that, and then again say thanks for having me. Question.
Thank you, Kelly. I think it's very important to have that said. It's again, very much an honor. I wanted to mention, when you talked about laws, is this environmental laws. That's a power that you will have with the land code, and it's a power that you can use it very much to your advantage. And I gave you the example. Let's say lakes become polluted. The lakes pollution comes and impacts your reserve lands. You have the power to put fines in place, to put something in place that will remedy that will force that as a government, and to be upheld in courts. You don't have that authority right now. Right now, if there was a spill in a waterway, or any community that's using a lake or a pond or whatever might be an example, you got to depend on the government, whether it's federal or provincial or someone else, to say what you would do. You can force that with your own environmental laws. And I think that's just an example of the power and the way you could use it to your advantage. Overfishing impacts your livelihood. That may be a law or an argument you could put forward that has that jurisdiction out in the water. Things like that are ways that you would maybe look at using this to your advantage. A question, sir. Barry?
I wanted to refer back to when you were talking about your community. You said you had traditional land or commonly owned land, and the rest of it was all
Certificate of possession or possession of your CP land.
yeah. And I just wondered how does that land that commonly owned, because our lands were going back to the beginning, our lands were commonly held by, owned by our people. And then once they got surveyed and divided up, now it's all pretty much like that, but I just wonder how much concern is there in your community about losing what you have, like your traditional knowledge or language, and how does this traditional or commonly owned land, how is that seen, like how is that used? Can that be used, for a conference or something to do with that? I guess when you say you have 10,000 non-members, as opposed to 850 members, there's got to be a concern about losing a basic connection to the land and to creation, and how do we, like every First Nation has to be concerned about that when we're talking about development, and how is that controlled? There has to be a balance, I just wonder how do you handle that in your community? It seems to me it would be a great concern to a lot of your people. They see themselves losing that.
Thank you, Barry, for that question. I guess as far as the culture and the language is concerned, because we've been able to go into more businesses and create opportunities or money that flow from those opportunities and businesses, we focus or try to focus on putting more of those dollars back into the community so that we have our kids, they're being taught the language. We have monies to hire the linguists, the teachers, to bring them sometimes into the schools or into the homes, or at least have opportunities for people to learn. So the more development we seem to have, and the more monies that hopefully gets created as a result of that, the more money goes into the culture and protection of who we are. So it's actually the reverse. We're not losing it. When I was elected as a councillor in 1974, a lot of our people simply, I think at that time, they told me they were ashamed to be Indians. I was like, wow, really? But many were, and they didn't speak the language. Maybe it was residential schools and things of that nature that caused that, but we were losing it. We came down to, a small percentage of our people could speak. Today, it's changing. Thank goodness. We're getting more of our kids learning at an earlier age. We're not as proficient as many of the communities in Canada. I know I've been to some of the Cree communities in Alberta. I listen to the kids and the people, and many of them, retain the language. We're trying to get back there, so it's been a movement that we're taking. So the more developments, the more things that happen, there's always a percentage going back into the culture. So I feel comfortable that it's never going to be lost. As far as the natives, the non-natives living on the reserves and so forth, as long as we control the lands, it's up to the people to decide. The land use plan, they still have to conform to the laws that are put together by our people. It's our laws that apply, not the provincial laws or federal laws. So we've been going out and buying lands. Most recently, some of our negotiations, for the highway negotiation example, I can tell you of, I think it's 740 lands, 740 acres of lands are being added from one deal, from highways. So we're buying lands. We have agreements with the province of British Columbia to turn those into reserve status. So we may be developing a lot of our lands, but we're also in a position to buy and accumulate lands. And that's the position we've taken. The Okanagan Lake Bridge, when they had to expand it, we said, all right, you can do that and take some of our lands, 4 acres you need at the base of the Okanagan Lake Bridge on the west side of the Okanagan Lake, fine, but we're going to use the monies that was paid in the millions of dollars, and we're going to go out and buy land. So we've done that. And so that's how we've kind of counteracted this. But it's always a balance, and it's always a community decision. The land use plan that is presented, you have the backup plans as to, well, how do you replace it? We preserve or try to preserve as much traditional lands that we might have. We're mindful of that. We have Aboriginal title claims. We deal with the province of British Columbia to protect those lands. And we say, look, anything happens up on the hillside where we hunt or we fish, that's going to remain. They can't impact it without consulting. And so we maintain part of that. We haven't forgotten that. So it's always a trade-off, because we do have members, and I will admit that we do have members that say we don't want to develop the land. But so far the majority are development-minded. So it all depends on the community. And I don't know the situation here in your community, whether you're development-minded or whether you more want things as they exist today. That's none of my business, but those are things that you have to make that decision for, and that's what you can do. And it's always a balance and a trade-off. And I know every community is different in many respects, but that's how my community is moved. But we're mindful of it. We're trying to balance it in that fashion. Yes? I'm sorry? How valid? Well, CPs, I don't know when the first CP was created. I think I go back to the history of our community, and I think when I was examining some research, I think probably the 1950s were the first CPs. People started fencing off lands. They had cattle. and they cut the hay fields, and they put up fences to keep the cattle in and so forth. And that led to more improvements being put on the hay sheds and everything else. And so some of the members in our community wanted to protect that. They wanted to pass that on down to their kids and their grandkids. So first thing you know, interests are created, so CPs were created. So the more families put into it, the more they had help, they had a right to do it, and eventually CPs were created. And that's how, at least how I understand our community was done. So CPs are a valid interest. They're akin to ownership in fee simple. Even though they're not fee simple, they're akin to it. They're recognized as that. So that's how our community's done it. I know in other communities, I'll use some of the ones in British Columbia, they don't believe in CPs. It's badlands and badlands only. In some places, Saskatchewan, same thing. Alberta, same thing. That all depends on the community. So the land code in your process have to reflect what your community's needs are and how you do business. So it will be up to you to decide that. You have with the land code, you have the power to create interest in land, whether you call it a CP or a certificate of allocation or a life interest or a temporary interest, a 20-year period. Anything you come up with, if that's what the community wants, that's what you can put in place and make that a valid instrument that's financeable and bankable. Those are the opportunities you have, whereas as it exists now, you don't really have that way to create that interest. You can create a license under the Indian Act, use a license for that. But a license, license is just a right to use the time, and it's for a particular purpose, and those become complicated. They become, are they financeable? There's enough security. Most common answer is it becomes difficult to finance. So it's just how you tend to use interest, whether it's CP or license or occupation use or whatever you might want to call it. Any more? Yes, another question. Thank you for all these questions, by the way. They're very well thought out. Thank you.
So I'm just curious when you talked about the CP holders or owners or whatever on that. So your band members, if they don't take any taxation, only the leasehold or the over
Non-native, yes.
Yeah. So if the native band members, if they're leasing property, they don't pay.
No, they don't pay that. If one of our band members leases a property, let's say puts on a mobile home park. Just use a mobile home park as an example. If they're non-natives that come onto the mobile home park, the non-natives have to pay the taxes. So there's a requirement. So the West Bank First Nation taxes property taxes on those non-natives. So if the band member owns that land, he has to collect, or she has to collect, or the owner, the CP interest holder has to collect or make sure that they're paid, and they usually ask the band to say they're non-native, you tax them. Somebody has to pay for that. So, but it's not an interest like that a band member has to be. If it's undeveloped land, no non-native living on it, it's not taxable. I use my example, my winery. I have a Business World Winery. And right now I haven't formed a company. I put that into personal name and it's not taxable. It's a benefit that I have. So the West Bank First Nation can't property tax assess it. And as well, we've done some interesting things that works with the financial institutions. We've created a mechanism for people to be able to borrow monies to build houses and using your own lands to do it. And how we do it is what's called an A-to-A lease. An A-to-A lease is how it's referred to, but it's simply, let's say you are a CP holder, you are the holder as a CP interest, you want to lease to yourself, so you go to yourself as the lessee, and you represent the lessor or the lessee. You do an A-to-A lease with yourself, that becomes a registrable instrument. Meaning, the banks will look at that leasehold interest. They'll look at it's on land, of course, but it's that leasehold interest that's used as security for bank financing purposes. So a band member,
here or anyplace else, an 8-8 lease, can then raise finances, because it's very hard, as I think everyone knows that has land seems the interest. How do you get borrow monies? How do you create an interest to make use of your lands? How do you, if you want to build a wing to your house, or build a house, or put a shed on it, or whatever you decide to do, costs money, can't always afford it. How many people can afford that? Not many. This is a mechanism that we can use, that we've created, that's been agreed to by all the financial institutions, so it's a strong lending instrument. Can't lose the land because there's seizure, but you can lose the interest of that leasehold for that term. So it's a very important aspect. So it creates a mechanism for people to build houses on land and to get security mortgage financing. It's very clever and it works very well. It's being used across Canada now.
So, for 10,000 people who are leasing right now, is that band owned land?
It's a mixture. Yes, it's a mixture. Some of the band land has been used for residential housing purposes. In the past, the band members voted to say, we'll designate this land as band land in common, so everybody gets a share of supposed to get a share of the revenues that might be generated. So that might be one aspect, band lands. Other band members have entered into agreements with developers, develop lands for subdivisions or for shopping centers. Money goes to that band member, and then the band comes in and says, we tax all these non-natives with businesses or that are on the lands, and the revenues go back to the band in that respect. So the ZP holder that they lease the land, he or she benefits. They get the revenues like it was their lands that they owned outright, but all of the other benefits of taxes and property taxes and all the other requirements that have to be paid for business licenses, you name it, DCCs, development cost charges, all goes to the band. So it works well in our area, and I can tell you that from a capitalistic point of view, it works well as a government, and seems to keep most people happy. Yes? I'm no longer in the council. I can't tell you what this seat of council is doing, but it was on the go. It's now on a permanent temporary hold. Yes, yeah, that's what's happening. Yeah, that's a whole other story. I'd love to talk to you more about that offline. Interesting. The opportunity is still there for any community to still create those types of things. And it's still an untapped opportunity that still exists, I believe.
But I think it's very shady ground to get involved in something like that.
Well, that's a different matter. I mean, it goes beyond land management. It goes with creating the financing and the will, because there is some risk to it, and you have to create the monies. And so financiers have to come in and be willing to take that risk, and they analyze it and say, are they willing to finance it? When you do privatization of hospitals, that sort of thing, a good part of the world, most of the world is now doing it. Canada has been more reluctant. However, when you look at other aspects, if someone here had to have a facial lift or something, the health doesn't pay for it, you've got to pay for that privately. So there's a mixture of all that. So anyways, there's huge opportunities that still exist. People still need help.
That's what I see with land management.
Yes.
More with power, we can become more.
Yes.
More powerful in Canada.
That's correct.
And it becomes a state of Canada, that's what it becomes a deficit.
Well, I don't know where Canada's going to go. I mean, it's a pretty philosophical question. I don't know where that's all going to go, but well,
opportunities or whatever.
The world doesn't move unless it's borrowing of monies. You have to do that if you want to move the world ahead. If you want to build a subdivision, no one generally has the money to build that subdivision unless it's mortgaged. So you have to finance it. So it's part of everyday living today. People can't always buy a car, for example. You're going to borrow for it, so you got to figure out a way to do it. So it's how you manage it. I mean, those are all issues that have to be carefully considered, that's for sure.
But those developers are going to come in and work with you unless you're, they have and there is something in that.
Developers are there, yes, they're profit motivated for the most part. You have very few philanthropists that will just give money to First Nations. They do exist, but there are not many, a handful maybe in the country. So they're not going to throw their money away and just simply give it to you. So they want a return. So it's profit. That's what motivates industry, and that's how the world works, I suppose. But I think we've kind of covered, I think, the essence of it. I just,
One more question.
oh, by all means.
So are you still partnering anymore?
To some extent, we are at West Bank. For example, we maintain, I think it's Section 87, Indian Act taxation protection, so that we don't have to pay taxes if we don't want to. We still get capital grant monies to put in roads and subdivisions, so we're still part of the Indian Act for that purpose, and we've done that intentionally. And other parts we're not. Land management jurisdiction, we're not. They don't control us. We do it ourselves.
So land management don't get you out of the
It gives you, yeah, it takes you out to about 25% of Indian Act, which translates to roughly, depends who you talk to. It used to be 34 sections, now it's 32 sections because they deleted 2 of the sections. So roughly 25% of Indian Act disappears. The other 75% remains. So the other 75%, either you have a modern day treaty or a self-government agreement like West Bank, and determine how much of that other 75% no longer applies. So it's a matter of how you negotiate that. But the most important part, I believe, is jurisdiction over the lands and resources. And that's the important thing. Because if you look at the Indian Act, you look at those 32 sections that exist right today, the minister, the governor and council, or his or her designate makes the decisions for you. Council may think that they have the power. When it comes down to a law or something being accepted, it rests in the hands of people that are sitting in Ottawa or at your regional offices. It doesn't rest here, and that's the fact. A lot of people have a tough time accepting that, but that's a fact, and that's how it works. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm honored. I know Kelly is pleased, and we talked about being here. We're thrilled to be here. Thank you, Chief Brissett, to you, your council, to all of you here, to your community. Thank you. We're honored, and anything we can do to help, we'll do our best, and we'll do it as fairly as we possibly can. And we're not going to tell you something that we believe is untrue. That's for sure. You've got the support of not only us, but all of the other people behind this process, behind it, to help needs to be given. So, Connie, thank you very much. Cassandra, thank you for being part of our team as well. Linda.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you, Kelly. The presentations were awesome. We had Cassandra on the agenda for a brief presentation. However, we're going to defer that to the next meeting due to lateness in time. Our next community meeting date is September the 12th, and we're expecting Councillor Bill McHugh from Georgina Island to be present to give a presentation. So that's about it. Thank you for coming.